Okay, we are live. Hey, KK. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Venkat.
Yeah. So I thought that last two sessions we covered the problem with vulnerabilities in general and prioritizing them, understanding them, their impacts, and so forth. And then the last meeting we covered a little bit around um, a little bit around uh, the the various characteristics and various data points that you would need to actually prioritize a vulnerability, uh, and how people people can use Transilience, even the API part, to just collect all the data points that are needed and all the questions that they need to ask before the prioritization. So I thought that today we will cover a um, what I think or what we think is less uh, thought about but more needed in terms of how do you select a particular vendor or a particular software uh, based on the security characteristics of that software version or a vendor. For example, let's say the development team is thinking about putting in new application or new functionality. I want to drop in a HTTP server. They usually have a test bench, so to speak, to go and look at the performance characteristics. How do I deploy it? Even some engineering teams do a chaos analysis with respect to how the application performs under stress, under various conditions, but rarely the security team is involved in the decision of making, selecting that vendor or that software in that baking exercise to look at what is a good software or a vendor or a version, so to speak, from a security standpoint. Though after that application gets deployed in the environment, security teams are the ones who are responsible for maintaining the security of it and monitoring the vendor for updates, monitoring the CVEs that come up on the versions and so forth. And definitely there is a notion of, there might be a notion of whether one vendor is better than the others or one version is better than the others in terms of just security vulnerabilities. I thought that we would spend some time talking and showing stuff around how security engineers can influence decisions with regards to which vendors to choose, which applications to choose. And even I have a version, the development team has a version or software, which version to choose as well.
Yeah, and I'm just with this whole vibe coding, right? Like 100 plus plugins or modules could get installed, right, based on a cursor prompt, and then you have no clue what vulnerabilities all of those apps are bringing in, right? So, and when it goes in for the pen test or it goes in for a SCA software composition analysis, that's when you discover that oops, you've got all of these components plugged in there which are vulnerable.
Yeah, makes sense. Before that, since we're all focused on vulnerabilities, on everybody's top of the mind today,
Hmm.
uh, there
I know.
is, uh, let me share,
Yeah, that bombshell news, man. Let's talk about that.
right? Uh, yeah, so we don't, there are a lot of unknowns here. Yesterday, MITRE released a letter to the board and CVE board. There's a
Hmm.
board for the CVE if people don't know it,
I,
comprised of several members, and the names of the board is available on their website as well. They sent a letter to the board saying they did not get the money to renew the contract to maintain the CVE database. There's a lot of unknowns here, but still, it is known that the resources that are being given to CVE/NVD over the last few months have been going down. Even we
hmm.
noticed that with CISA getting cut, etc. This could mean anywhere from, if you look at the chain of the activities and the value that CVE provides, there is a central place where vendors and security researchers can file vulnerabilities, and there is that truth reporting, and correspondingly there is a database of those vulnerabilities. Somebody goes in and assigns a ID, things like that. There is analysis that goes on with respect to, here is the vulnerability, here is the vendor link. Let me, NVIDIA goes and analyzes the link, and last but not least, all the data is available over the API for free for anyone can use and download the vulnerability. So there are implications if some or all of that breaks. So anyway, I think it is on one side, it is bad to think that way, but taking maybe it just like the notion of multiple countries / organizations should take up the problem. Maybe it's a good thing, because when the band-aid comes off the wound here, that some of the work that has been happening in the private industry with respect to automated analysis of links, etc., can be done by the private industry, and therefore can see the whole problem can get some help with respect to automated analysis and so forth. And the backlog that NVIDIA has is reduces a bit. That's the pro of it. But the con of it is, at least I hope that the core of the value, in my opinion, that CVE provides is that centralized place where people can report is still exists. Any thoughts there?
But this is a bit scary for me, in the sense that with more and more funding constraints, what else is going to get impacted, right? I mean, we've already seen the NVD backlog increase.
Yeah.
We have CISA staff being asked to leave. So all of these are universally significant institutions. It's not just for America, right? They perform a globally important role. So it's highly concerning that, I mean, imagine CISA getting defunded, CV, NVD, and MITRE getting defunded. I mean, they are extremely important to the global cybersecurity. The good guys, right?
Yeah.
What's next? NIST. So, I mean, it's not a pleasant scenario at all.
Any comments or questions are welcome, and we don't have any insider information, so to speak, though MITRE is about 5 miles from my house. They have a huge office. They have, I think, around maybe 1,500 employees. But hopefully there's a people side of this too, that we could probably answer a bit, since we follow NVD, CISA, and MITRE closely than many people, because we have to, from a day-to-day job perspective. We can offer our opinions around what it is with respect to the impact will be under various scenarios. But I don't think anybody knows what the real impact is. Tomorrow they might say we got the funding or not. Or the worst case is that the database goes away.
Yeah, and what happens to scanners that rely on NVD solely? Anyway, they are a problem, right? We discussed this last time. If you only rely on NVD, you're already blind to 20,000 vulnerabilities, submitted vulnerabilities, right?
Right. Yeah, my personal opinion is that the everyday people are downloading the database all the time, so most of the people have the latest database. The ongoing analysis part, if private industry can take that up, whoever can analyze a CVE best will win, right? We're not relying on NVIDIA anymore. There's a lot of things MITRE does, not just CVE, right? There is attack analysis that they do. Hopefully that will stay. There's good APT information that world gets in general. There's good work there. but in terms of there's a lot of research that for example, the last time we showed the decision tree, the SSVC decision tree, there is research going on with respect to how do we represent a prioritization of CVs in decision trees, things like that. Hopefully that will stand. But the core is, I still think, is that a centralized place for people to report vulnerabilities, and I think the rest of it, private organizations can take over the analysis part and the scoring part. Whoever does better scoring win in a free market, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so let's go back to the version conversation. Let me share again the screen and show what the statement is, so to speak. Close this. I took a couple of examples, and I want your comments there as well. KK, a couple of firewall examples, Palo Alto and Fortinet, and then a couple of applications like HTTP applications, Tomcat, HTTP server, jQuery. It's fascinating to, here are the versions of Palo Alto, right? So I think the latest is whatever, and they have high, low, medium CVEs. Just like when you're buying a stock, that's an easy example to give, that there is a micro view of how the last week is performing. But if you want to look at a health of a company in terms of financials, etc., or in terms of stock, you want to look at broader multi-year view of what the stock is performing. In the same vein, right, this is Palo Alto's 11.0, but if from a security perspective, I want to get a understanding of how a company and a company's Palo Alto and a particular operating system or a particular software is performing, if I can zoom out 1 year, right, and you can see that it's dropped, and then zoom out even further, and see our versions, you can see that there is a quote-unquote trend in terms of how a software is performing with respect to vulnerabilities. And you can see that it is not random. Our eyes can see that there is a pattern to this. And it would be interesting to analyze why does the pattern exist. KK, you have some thoughts around taking Palo Alto and Palo Alto as an example of the versions and graphs and why such a pattern exists?
It reminds me of my early days in security when we used to go and do security audits, and we used to find firewalls that are not at the latest version. And that was pretty much a typical finding, right? You're not running the latest version of FortiOS or PAN-OS or whatever. And the pushback we always got from the firewall admins was that, nope, we will never upgrade to the latest version because it's always unstable. I think this kind of graph shows you that they were right in a way and we were wrong, because the initial version release, a major release, you can see how it stabilizes, at least from a security perspective. And if this kind of bugginess exists from the security point of view, a similar graph if we made of quality issues or operational issues, pretty much something similar we might see there as well. So clearly the initial major release is a problem, and then it improves over time. That's my first takeaway. My other takeaway also is that things are getting better as far as Palo Alto is concerned. You can see that in the middle, like probably when they did some massive new revolutionary feature, I don't know, layer 7 firewall or whatever they came up with at that time, that probably yielded a lot buggier firewalls. And then the general ratio seems to be downwards, right? If we see with every major release, the number of bugs seems to be coming down. A third takeaway for me is, what the hell, man, firewalls with so many bugs, there is no workaround. You have to patch. I mean, I will not tell you which firewall we use, but we got advisories from our firewall vendor just last week about a critical remotely exploitable bug. And I'm like, man, this is not even a system running inside my network, protected behind multiple levels of WAF and proxy and EDR. This is right there on the perimeter. Firewall compromise is unimaginable, but this is still scary. Like even if the graph is downwards, it's still highly concerning that firewalls have CV8 and 9 vulnerabilities. Those are kind of my three broad takeaways from this graph. And I've never seen vulnerabilities depicted like this. That's why I was telling the team that I love uh, this UI.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the observations. It's fascinating to say we can predict what the number of vulnerabilities is going to be on version 12.1.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's the holy grail of AI, no? If we can predict.
Right. Yeah, and so that's kind of fascinating for us to think about. We can actually predict the future in terms of vulnerabilities, even the number. And the second thing is that I'm also imagining that acquisitions play some role in this as well, KK.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's another perspective. I mean, it would be interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, they also acquire stuff that they integrate into more of a platform, but we don't track at a platform level bugs as such. So, for example, when they acquire a Prisma or Demisto, was it that they acquired that became their SOAR? Yeah, Demisto.
Yes. Yeah.
So all that goes into more like a platform play, but I'm sure that that introduces bugs as well. Fortinet does not seem to be. Can you just take it back a bit? Let's look at it more historically. Fortinet also seems to be improving to some extent, but I think their graph peaks more than like in Palo Alto. Fortinet, are we at? Oh
Go
no,
ahead. Let me
no. I
change
was just
the.
trying to compare Palo and Forti.
Yeah.
Oh no, Fortinet is okay, man. It's in the 40s, and Palo Alto is regularly hitting the 70s, 60s, 70s. So that's
Right.
another perspective. A
Yeah,
side
and
by
I'm
side.
assuming that the coverage, reading the number, I'm not sure, the number of deployments probably higher. Maybe 14 is probably higher than because there's some SMBs as well. So let's go into a little bit of a HTTP side. You can see similar trends. I opened up.
I'm just
Actually,
wondering if somebody from product marketing at Fortinet contacts us or puts up this graph and says, on average, we have 50% of the critical vulnerabilities that other leading firewalls in the market.
yeah, from a security standpoint, it's a glass house, right? So it's usually
Yeah,
not a
yeah. You better be careful of your marketing message.
right. We see similar trends in non-security as well. For example, HTTP server, whenever there is a new vulnerability, it's quite interesting to see that the last, or there is some stability in terms of here, for example, I can see there's 2.4.0 release, and we can see that, of course, there is the vulnerability number increased, but maybe the last few releases, the vulnerabilities got stabilized. Maybe the reason could be that some of the application developers, the pattern that we have observed is that they don't backport the vulnerabilities, the security vulnerabilities, too much, right? They'll have probably version -2 as the security updates, and they won't do security updates. But also, these are the reported vulnerabilities as well, not just fixed vulnerabilities. So there's some truth to the attackers would go after the latest vulnerabilities, etc. So whatever the reason might be, that the number of reported/fixed vulnerabilities towards the tail end of a feature, tail end of a major version is tampered off, especially on the application side.
I have a question though. Does it never reach a stage where they release a version where they finally patch all the critical vulns at least?
So that's a good question. Let's say you are on a given version, and there are obviously criticals, and I'm using Transilience, but I'm sure there are other ways to achieve this. Let's say there is a CVE that you found on a particular version. Now you have to go to the development team and recommend an update. And usually you would say, if possible, go to the latest, which is in here, the 3.1. But if I am on 2.14, let's say, HTTP server 2.14 or 2.15, and you have some criticals, what's your path, right? As a security engineer, what do you recommend to the development team? And if you say go to 3.1, then they'll probably say things will break because it's a major version upgrade. There's a lot of testing that you need to do. It will take 2 months, etc. And to go back to point, there's always vulnerabilities on the next version, which is the goal for a security engineer at the end of the day to recommend something that is of the risk balance, like the risk is reduced to an extent that you're comfortable doing that in the time frame that the SLA defines you to do. So and keeping the development teams happy. So there's not a version always that exists. There's zero vulnerabilities, right? If there's zero vulnerabilities on any version, that won't show up in the database because there is no vulnerabilities that gets reported.
Yeah. If there is.
If there is, yeah. And usually, in my experience, even if there is, it's always a battle to upgrade to latest because of something breaks.
Yeah. So we have this feature, right? You can query Transilience this exact same question.
Yeah. So you can say in Transilience analysis, so I'm going back to the feature a bit, you can click on any version and say, which version should I recommend? And easily you can see that if I am on 2.3.14, a better recommendation for a development team from a security perspective is that I would just ask them to go to 2.16, which is the last minor version of 2.3, and not push them to 2.4 or 3 if I get pushback for development, because I'm more concerned about the SLA and time than losing my energy over fighting the battle of a major version upgrade. The second is that there are multiple angles that you need to look at to say, okay, I want to recommend 2.3.15. Now, I want a quicker way to see what are the number of criticals, highs, etc. on the version that I'm recommending that are fixed, right? So if this is asking you to go to 2.4, then I will not ask. I cannot ask the development team to go to 2.3.15 because there is a critical that is asking you to 2.4. So there is a notion of what is the updates? What are the updates that would cover the SLA, which is what is the closest version from the version I have that have no criticals and highs, is the most important question from a security perspective. That the closest to what I have with all the SLAs covered is the safest I can recommend that the development team is most comfortable with. So we have, you can click on the Transilience analysis and ask the questions, right? So here we are considering all the CVEs in this view, and you can ask what is the safest CVE to safest version to upgrade, and define your thing. The safest is no criticals or highs. We built a little tiny feature here. If you can see the hover over, there are 3 things here with respect to not just showing the criticals and highs, but also the notion of a minimal update, a best update, and a safest update. With minimal update is what is the closest version to what I have. I'm on 2.4.14. The closest is 2.4.6.2 that has the closest version in terms of the difficulty of the lowest difficulty of upgrade that has no criticals or highs. And the best update, is just go to the latest, etc., etc. So we have defined these the safest, best, and minimal updates for the user to quickly hover over and get to recommend the right versions.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Actually, I had not noticed that feature. We have a very good question in the comments from Ranjit. I was thinking of the same actually. How do we proactively kind of block these vulnerabilities as the app is being not, I would say even earlier, not just delivered but developed, right? So can we look at a cursor plugin that as soon as there is requirements being installed and stuff like that? I mean, whatever, which is a better way to like highlight these during
The
PLC.
deployment delivery, yeah. I have a hunch that since much of the, for example, Cursor is doing a better job at, this is again going on the AI side, of plugins with MCP plugins and so forth, that as I'm deploying, for example, much of the versions, application versions are in the package.json dot files inside the application. So the version information is in the the JSON files inside the application, and it's easy for the IDE environment to go in and look at the vulnerabilities and determine whether they are vulnerable or not. I'm trying to find an example here of particular package.json file. But that's it. I think that's the best way to do it. As the developers are putting in information with respect to what the versions are, that's the best way. So let me share this, going a bit off topic, but at least it will address the question and paints some vision with respect to what we think is going to happen. Nothing with our product, but in general. So if you look at where the vulnerabilities start, the source of vulnerabilities is something like this, right? There is an environment. There is a environment I'm defining. The developers are defining, and this is where the versions are defined, are pinned, so to speak. And now, while I'm doing this, let's say I have an agent here that I can ask, say. So let's say a security engineer has given a set of prompts that automatically runs whenever I edit a file. The prompts that security engineer gave, similar to here, is automatically checking. So here, for example, the agent is looking at this file, this package.json file, and it is reading to it, and I'm sure it will find the version here, and it will go and say vulnerabilities, and it's calling the MCP tools. And by the way, this is the MCP tool that we developed, that will connect to our database, and will get you the vulnerabilities and say, hey, this is the vulnerabilities that you have, and go fix it. It's probably a better. I don't think we did a session on the MCP stuff, but I think that's what at least my vision is of how the vulnerabilities can be stopped right at the source.
Yeah. I think maybe next week the one we should do it around MCP.
Yeah, it's in alpha stage, but sure, I mean that gives a good view into the future. Cool. We're about time there, but I hope we covered the topics that I wanted to cover.
Yeah, and this I think also kind of gives some insight into how complicated this vulnerability management problem is, right? Because let's say you run an SS scan, you get infrastructure issues, you don't get SBOM issues, right? Then you need to run an SCA tool to get the SBOM issues. You need to, then you have AppSec, you have attack surface management. I mean, it's all just flooding in. You have your CSPMs, cloud tools giving you additional issues. I mean, I don't envy a CISO's job at all, where they have at least 20 to 50 sources of vulnerability information coming in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's I'm sure there's a long road to solving the problem.
Right.
Cool. Any more questions? I don't see any other questions there. So we can probably stop the session here.
All right, Venkat.
Yeah.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.